shed.
Hi, and welcome back to my channel. First, let me start with an apology. It has been quite some time since I uploaded, but I'm back again with some fresh new content for 2025. In this video, I'll be tearing down a 2012 KTM 250 EXC-F engine. I purchased this bike as a non-runner. I'm interested to find out why. This video will be a teardown only to try and establish why the seller gave up on this engine. I've already established that the engine cranks over with the starter motor and has spark. Now that the engine's out of the bike, I can set it up on my engine stand and drain the oil. The oil is dark, but I can't see any shiny particles. There is some sludge on the magnet, but let's not get excited yet. It could be from just normal wear and tear. Let's get the outer clutch cover off. It is so hot here today, 37 degrees Celsius. Removing this cover reveals the clutch. No surprises yet. The water pump cover is the next thing to be removed. Removing the cover exposes the water pump impeller. The impeller can be removed by removing an E-clip, then prising the impeller from the shaft. Take care not to lose the tiny drive pin. The inner clutch cover is next. A gentle tap with a soft hammer to break the gasket seal. The cover looks good. Removing the inner clutch cover exposes a multitude of drive gears, all of which look fine. Let's keep digging. Next is the clutch pressure plate. These springs apply pressure to the plate and allow power transfer through the clutch pack from the crankshaft to the transmission. Once the bolts and springs are out of the way, the pressure plate and clutch pack can be removed. push rod out of the way next to allow access to the locking tabs which secure the nut. The basket fingers have some markings from the clutch pack, but no serious wear to be concerned about. The hub nut is secured by locking tabs, which must be knocked down so the nut can be removed. It's almost impossible to hold the hub from spinning without this tool. Once the nut has been removed, the hub and basket can come away. Still no evidence of any major damage. At last, I've found some wear to the shift locating drum. Although there is not enough damage to justify giving up on this engine, if you look closely you can see the burring to the aluminium component. Let's keep going. Next is the kickstart mechanism and intermediate gear. Oil pump gear and idler are next. To remove the gear selector shaft, first you need to remove the gear shift lever, followed by the shift locating drum. Big fingers, small parts. In order to remove the primary drive gear, the tool needs to be applied to prevent the crankshaft from rotating. This nut is left hand or reverse thread. The oil pump cover bolts are Loctited in, so care needs to be taken not to strip out the heads of the cap screws. Some light wear marks, but nothing to indicate oil pump failure. Some gentle persuasion is required to remove the primary drive gear. It looks good. Let's turn this around and start on the other side. Behind this cover is the oil filter. Let's see what secrets this can tell us. This screw is not OEM. This is the first indication of any damage. Someone has tried to do a repair here. The oil filter cover has been damaged. If there's anything frightening, it will be in the oil filter. We are looking for metallic particles stuck in the element. There's nothing, no indication of any metal in the filter element. Metal and copper fragments caught in the filter element is usually a sign of big end failure. Next is the ignition cover. Behind here is the flywheel and stator, as well as the starter motor torque limiter and free wheel gears. Stuck down with high temperature silicon. Someone has been in here. This is the starter motor torque limiter. It looks okay. Black paint. Interesting. This is the hydraulic clutch slave cylinder. There's no indication of any brake fluid leaks. Again, a little gentle persuasion is required to overcome the magnetic force of the magneto and the gasket. We're looking for broken or damaged windings or any burn marks to indicate a failure. As I said earlier, the engine had spark, so I'm quietly confident that there is no issues with the stator or pulse generator. Turns out there is an issue here, which I discover later after a thorough cleaning. Starter motor out. Again, I have no concerns with this component as the engine was cranking, but I will bench test it later. The flywheel is next, also known as the rotor or magneto. A special puller is required here. The crankshaft is keyed and tapered. Removing the magneto is practically impossible without this puller. As you can see, this clamping tool is useful for more than just one application. Make sure the puller is securely engaged onto the flywheel. There we are, as simple as that. The starter clutch, or KTM refer to it as the freewheel bearing. This allows the starter motor to crank the engine and then freewheels once the engine has started. Okay, time for the nitty-gritty. Let's see what's under here. There's another bolt, dopey. Aha, there it is. Clean as a whistle. Removing the cam chain tensioner relieves the tension on the cam chain, allowing the cams to be removed. The camshafts can now be removed by releasing the cradle. KTM refer to this as a bush support or a bridge. Once the top half of the bridge has been removed, the cam journals can be seen. This is where engine failure is most common. These journals can starve oil pressure and fail, but in this case they're perfect. Now the camshafts can be removed from the head. I am impressed with the KTM engineers. Making this camshaft bush support or bridge a separate component to the head is a great idea. Usually when the camshafts fail, the whole head is a bin job. In this circumstance, the head can be saved thanks to this removable cradle. While I have a moment, if you like my content and you would like to see more, please like and subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. It costs nothing and really helps grow my channel. Also, remember to hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any future videos. Next, I'll crack these head studs and remove the cylinder head. Once cracked, the head studs can be wound out with an impact driver. A gentle tap with the dead blow mallet to break the gasket. First impressions, there appears to be some carbon build-up on the valves, which could suggest that this engine was burning oil. The cylinder walls look fine. Hang on. What's this odd mark in the centre of the piston? Has the piston been hitting the spark plug? No, there's no indication that the piston's been hitting the spark plug, and there's no other damage to the piston or cylinder to indicate there was a foreign body in the combustion chamber. Let's remove the cylinder. The cylinder looks to be in great condition. The hone marks can still be seen. Time to check the ring gap. As suspected, that ring gap is excessive. You could drive a truck through that gap. We'll get a measurement on that later. The cylinder dimensions appear to be within spec. This indicates that the rings have worn, not the cylinder walls. Next is to check and see if there's any play in the big end bearing. No movement whatsoever. It looks very clean in there. Let's get the engine off the stand so we can split the casings.
It just says the serial number and hard.
But first I'll remove the secondary oil pump cover. Okay, moving on to the casing bolts. This ring of bolts needs to be removed so the casings can be split. To prevent damage to the engine casings when splitting them, this special tool is recommended. There, we're apart. Now we can see the crankshaft and the transmission clearly. I'm still not seeing any major issues with this engine. The transmission and crankshaft look perfect. I'm beginning to lose hope of finding anything wrong with this engine. The only real concern I've found with this whole teardown is the failed repair attempt to the oil filter cover. I doubt this repair would have been successful and the engine would have leaked oil from the cover. To keep the transmission together, I like to apply cable or zip ties to the ends of the shafts. Doing this helps to prevent the gears from sliding off as I remove the transmission from the casing. A couple of cable ties around the middle keeps the clusters together also. Shift roller looks new. And then the shift hooks. I try to keep everything together to save confusion later. This crankshaft looks and feels great. Of course, I don't possess X-ray vision and I cannot see the condition of the big end bearing. But if the condition of the rest of the engine is anything to go by, it's okay too. Same with the transmission. It looks brand new, and there is no reason to suspect that there is any problem with it. A good pre-wash inspection of the crankcases. There are no telltale marks to suggest any component failure has ever occurred. Let's get them ready for a bath. Washing parts thoroughly can sometimes reveal hidden issues such as cracks, wear or damage. It is always good practice to wash your components and then carry out a final thorough inspection. KTM 6-speed transmission and selector components. There is some wear evident to the shift roller and selector drum. You can see the burring.
So what do I measure?
I'm just looking for any sort of wear or damage. Right there looks to be a wear mark and a scratch. It appears as though the hard facing has been worn off the selector shaft. It should be replaced. First impressions, the transmission looks immaculate. I'm looking for any chipped or broken or worn teeth on the gears. The splines look to be in good condition. These can sometimes suffer wear, particularly the output shaft if the drive sprocket becomes loose. I've found an issue with the flywheel, a couple actually. It appears to have been rubbing on the stator housing to a point where it is worn through and the magnets can be seen. Careful here not to cut myself. The second issue is in the freewheeling bearing. A tab is broken off, which allows the spring and the roller to fall out. Unfortunately, this flywheel can't be reused. If you were rebuilding this engine, you would have to source a new flywheel. Okay, so here's the stator and housing. After seeing the separation on the flywheel, I thought I'd better check this for any damage. Initial inspection, I cannot see any major damage, although there are some rub marks. even pick that up or not. I have no concerns with this stator or pulse generator. Like I mentioned earlier, when the engine was still in the frame, it was cranking and making spark. Okay, moving on to the cylinder head and what KTM call the camshaft bush support. There is no wear at all to the inlet or exhaust camshaft journals. I would have no problem in reusing these components. There is no indication whatsoever of any oil starvation to this top end. Now let's compare a head I've had laying around for a while. It's off a 2013 250 SXF. As you can see, the journals are trash. This whole head is a throwaway job. You can see the burrs where the metal has picked up. This top end has starved for oil. The exhaust side in comparison to the inlet is reasonably okay. Two completely different ways of thinking from the same manufacturer. Drop me a comment. Which one do you prefer? Moving on to the crankshaft. This part feels solid. I would have no problems reusing this component. Same with the cylinder. There are no cracks, marks or scratches. The nickel plating is intact. The piston otherwise is in good nick. The only explanation I have for this strange mark on the top is there is a technique where a tool is inserted through the plug hole onto the piston, which effectively locks up the engine, allowing for disassembly. Okay, moving on. Let's check the compression ring gap. Using the piston, evenly push the ring down into the cylinder about 2 centimeters. That gap is huge. Let's get a measurement. Not even. .81 millimeters or 71 thou. Recommended ring gap is 12 to 14 thou. Okay, let's check out the oil ring gap. It doesn't look to be as bad. Okay, what do we have here? 1.06 millimeters or 42 thou. Still excessive. This engine would have been blowing smoke. Okay, next up, let's have a look at the left-hand engine cover. This casing would be in excellent condition if it wasn't for the dodgy oil filter cover repair. I can only guess that at some stage they've either stripped the thread or broken a bolt off on the oil cover and they've tried to repair it. I'm confident this casing can be saved. The hole could be welded up, re-drilled and tapped, or a threaded plug inserted. Either way, it's still not a throwaway item. Having said that, if you're not capable to attempt a repair of this magnitude, the repair costs could be quite significant. The right-hand casing, on the other hand, is in pretty good nick. These casings are usually a matched pair, and they are sold by the factory that way. You can get them individually on places like eBay, and I've known bike engines to run fine with mismatched casings. Okay, in summary, for a 13-year-old engine, it's in quite good condition. I think the reason the seller gave up on this engine would be the dodgy oil filter cover repair, and secondly, I believe this engine would have been down on compression and blowing blue smoke. These issues, although totally repairable, may have been just too daunting for the seller, and he decided to give up on it. For those of you that are hoping for a video of me putting this engine back together, I'm sorry to inform you, but as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, this is a teardown only. I won't be putting this engine back together. For those of you that have made it this far and listened to my monotone dialogue, I would like to thank you for sticking to the end. I really appreciate it. Please go the extra mile and like and subscribe and give this video the thumbs up. And hit that notification bell so you'll be sure not to miss my next video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.